The crystalline halls of the Zephyrian Academy echoed with the soft chimes of their species' natural communication as hundreds of students gathered in the combat amphitheater. Their translucent bodies shimmered with anticipation, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floors. At the center of it all stood Elsa, the only human in a school designed for beings who had never known gravity heavier than 0.3 g or atmospheric pressure above a whisper. She was an anomaly, a deathworlder. As they called her kind behind those melodious whispers they thought she couldn't understand. Her solid, opaque flesh seemed crude compared to their elegant crystalline forms. Her movements, even at rest, carried a weight and deliberation that spoke of a world that didn't forgive weakness. "The human thinks she belongs here," chimed instructor Xylith, his form flickering with disdain. "Perhaps it's time she learned her place among civilized beings." The crowd's harmonics shifted to amusement. They had watched Elsa struggle in their academic pursuits, her mind too linear, too crude, for their multidimensional mathematics and quantum philosophy. She was a curiosity at best, an embarrassment at worst, a charity case from the Galactic Council's diversity initiative. Helen, her only friend among the Zephyrians, floated closer with concern pulsing through her crystalline structure. "Elsa," she whispered, "you don't have to do this. Challenge rituals aren't meant for your kind." Elsa's jaw tightened. She had endured months of condescension, of being treated like a primitive beast, barely worthy of sharing their refined air. Every academic failure had been met with patronizing sympathy, every social misstep with barely concealed disgust. But when they had questioned her right to even exist in their halls of learning, something had snapped. "I'm not backing down," Elsa said, her voice carrying an edge that made several nearby Zephyrians' forms flicker nervously. "If they want to prove I don't belong here, let them try." The challenge circle began to glow, ancient Zephyrian technology reading the combatants and adjusting the environment. Across from Elsa, their champion materialized, Corthanak, a being of pure crystalline perfection whose academic achievements were legendary. His form towered above her, refracting light into dazzling patterns that could disorient lesser minds. The rules were simple by Zephyrian standards, a contest of will and intellect, where mental pressure and crystalline manipulation would determine the victor. No crude physical violence, such things were beneath civilized beings. The arena would amplify their natural abilities, and the first to yield or collapse would lose. "This is almost cruel," Professor Veltar chimed from the observation deck. "The poor creature doesn't even understand what she's facing." Corthanak's form began to pulse with energy, the air itself seeming to bend around him. Waves of psychic pressure rolled outward, designed to overwhelm an opponent's mind with pure intellectual force. Around the arena, lesser students stepped back, their forms flickering under the residual effects. Elsa didn't move. The champion increased his output. Crystalline resonances that could shatter mountains on his homeworld now focused entirely on this single human girl. The very air shimmered with power that should have driven her to her knees, begging for mercy. Instead, Elsa smiled. She had grown up on a world where the atmospheric pressure could crush these beings like soap bubbles, where the gravity was so intense that her bones had grown dense as stone, her muscles like steel cables, where storms routinely generated electrical discharges that dwarfed their entire civilization's power output. But more than that, she had grown up human, is that it? She asked, her voice cutting through the crystalline harmonics like a blade through silk. The arena fell silent. Corthanak's form flickered with uncertainty. His mental assault, capable of overwhelming the greatest Zephyrian scholars, seemed to bounce off this crude deathworlder like rain off stone. Elsa took a step forward. She had spent her entire time at the academy learning about Zephyrian technology, their crystalline structures, their resonance frequencies. While they had dismissed her as too primitive to understand their advanced sciences, she had been studying, learning, adapting. Now she reached out with her crude, dense physical mind, not trying to match their ethereal intellectual dance, but to do what humans did best. She found the problem, identified the solution, and acted with decisive brutality. Her thoughts, trained by a world that killed the weak, pressed against the champion's crystalline matrix with the focused intensity of a laser. Not scattered like their multidimensional approach, but concentrated, linear, inexorable. Korthanak's form began to vibrate. Hairline cracks appeared in his crystalline structure. Impossible, breathed Instructor Zillith. She's using harmonic resonance, but how? Elsa pressed harder. On her world, earthquakes were common, and humans had learned to listen to the deep songs of stressed stone and metal. She had heard that same song in Korthanak's structure the moment he began his attack. Now she simply sang back. The champions. Form shuddered, his perfect crystalline matrix beginning to destabilize under harmonics he had never encountered. The deep, primal frequencies of a world that had forged its children in pressure and fire. Stop! Korthanak's mental voice cracked, his form beginning to lose cohesion. I yield. I yield. The arena's glow faded. In the sudden silence, Elsa stood alone in the center, unchanged, unbroken. Around her, hundreds of Zephyrian students stared in shock at their greatest champion, now flickering weakly as he tried to maintain even basic structural integrity. How? Professor Veltar's voice was barely a whisper. Elsa looked up at the observation deck, her eyes hard as the world that had made her. You wanted to know if I belong here, she said. I don't. None of you could survive a day where I come from, but I'm here anyway and I'm not going anywhere. She turned toward the exit, pausing only to help the still trembling Helan to her floating feet. The difference between us isn't that you're more civilized, she continued. It's that when your world tried to kill you, you learned to hide. When mine tried to kill me, I learned to kill back. As she walked away, the assembled Zephyrians parted before her like water, their harmonic whispers now carrying something they had never directed toward a human before. Respect. The Deathworlder girl had not just won, she had done it without breaking. A sweat, using their own sciences against them with a precision that spoke of months of patient study and perfect understanding. She had taken their contempt, their derision, their attempts to humiliate her, and turned them into weapons as sharp as the world that had forged her. Behind her, Korthanak finally stabilized his form, but the cracks remained, permanent reminders that there were forces in the universe that even the most advanced civilizations couldn't comprehend. Forces named human.